This is Jake Seeley, and I'm the blown ACL that ruins your football season.
Good news, everyone! Let's get dangerous. This is so good!
I know!
It feels so right!
It's Jake Seeley.
I'm sorry, who is this?
Nice try, Moonman! Pretending not to know! Earth's greatest mastermind!
You just made the list!
I thought you said that was a myth.
Just because it's a myth doesn't mean it's not true.
If you all blindly follow my plan, we may have a chance.
Sure, we talk about it all the time.
Really?
No, burn.
Game on, you ducks, as mentioned, and I think you know because you're listening, but about every other week in the offseason is the plan for the podcast, which means I'll hit right before perfect timing. You know, we're heading out of town to go visit family during NFL free agency week. Couldn't have timed that any better or worse, obviously. So I will be doing a podcast ahead of time. And then, I mean, honestly, you don't need 7 podcasts during free agency week anyway. So I'll have the biggest movers, takeaways, ranks changes, and all that kind of stuff the week when we get back after free agency, because I'll be following it, and I'm sure you'll see me tweeting and talking about it as I avoid weird family situations, as everybody does with in-laws and families. But no, Nicole has a great family. We're going to have a lot of fun. But yeah, I'll have some downtime. So I'll be checking in. But these next 2 podcasts, these next 2 podcasts, this is what I do for a living, everybody. The next 2 podcasts, we're going to talk about way too early rankings. They're up at the site. They're over at The Athletic. You go check them out. Jump into the comments if you have any players that I don't talk about today or next podcast that you want to talk about, or any conversations just in general. And I love talking football all year round, as we all do. So I figured I'd do quarterbacks and wide receivers together, and then running backs and tight ends. Everybody likes to group the quarterbacks and tight ends together, and I feel like that's just I don't know. We were just like putting the 2 kids in the corner at the kid. Yeah, like I was about to say, redheaded, all that kind of thing. But can we say that anymore these days? I don't even know anymore. I can't say anything. I think I probably even just got canceled on something right there. But we're going to continue and go through quarterbacks and wide receivers. Some of the more, I guess, conversational players that we're in the ranks so far. So right near the top, I have Jalen Hurts at 5. He's in front of Burrow, Dart, Dak, and others, and I got some questions about him. And I understand the hesitancy coming off last year and another new offensive coordinator, but I mean, let's be honest, that's a good thing after what we saw last season. Some of you probably have seen or heard when I talked about Saquon Barkley and everybody's victory lapping that he wasn't a top 5 running back. And it was miserable for the Eagles across the board because that was my pushback. Worst season is Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is a full-time starter. Worst season for Devontae Smith since his rookie year. Worst season for A.J. Brown since he's been with the Eagles. It was just worst, except for Goddard, because Goddard just caught 1 billion touchdowns. So I actually have hope for Hurts, and even if it doesn't go right next year, even if the offensive line concerns continue, Lane Johnson and the rest, I think that we're looking at the fact that he can still get back to 21 points per game. 2021 really gets you inside the top 5, and that's what I'm going to shoot for. You guys know that's my strategy in general. Like, once we get past that top tier, which, by the way, the first 4 for me are Allen, Lamar, May, and Daniels, obviously with the rushing upside for all of them, and of course, all of them having 23, 24 plus points upside, is that I want to potentially get a top 5 quarterback. Once we're past that, I don't care. I'm not drafting a quarterback in the 5th round, 6th round, because that's where you start chasing the upside. Because what's the big difference between Dak Prescott and Baker Mayfield in a bounce back season? Or hell, Daniel Jones, which we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. But that's why I'm going after Hurts at number 5. If you don't want to do it, I completely understand. There's no guarantees. A.J. Brown, even if he's traded, they're going to address the situation and bring somebody else in. All that being said, there's no guarantee he gets back to 21. But if they just let him run a little bit more with the tush push, yay, just get some more of those touchdowns back. And he doesn't need to get to 14, 16 rushing touchdowns. If he just gets back to 11 or 12 and back to the Jalen Hurts in the ground game, and that's the more important part because he's been passing pretty well and putting up some decent numbers, he can get back to the 20. Again, shooting for upside, I think 5 actually could end up being over a full season a little bit aggressive, but it's shooting for ceiling. Conversely, why I have Justin Herbert at 10, and a lot of people are like, why isn't he higher? I understand the shooting for upside with him, and people are going to point to his first 2 seasons, which were 700 pass attempts. That's just not the Justin Herbert we need, or that's not the Justin Herbert Harbaugh and the Chargers need. On top of it, just had his best season in the past 5 at 17.8, which still doesn't get you inside the top 10 in points per game. But the other part about it is everybody's getting excited about Mike McDaniel. Deservedly so. Like, when we talk the running back show, you're going to see how high I have him here in Hampton. And yes, we're excited about it, but let's understand also Harbaugh plus McDaniel. Harbaugh already came in and sent the Chargers from being a top 10 pace per game, so plays per game offense, to bottom 10. Actually, almost inside the bottom 5. And now you bring in Mike McDaniel, who's doing the same thing with the Dolphins, mostly because he runs the ball so much, so you bleed out the clock and you have success there. But you put those two together, we might be like talking 31st lowest pace per game in the league, or plays per game. Combine them. Pace plays per game. That's my issue here. So one, I don't think they're going to ask Herbert to throw 35, 40 times a game. Two, even if they were trying to pass that much, they're not going to have that much attempts because of their pace. And of course, we talk defense on the other side of the ball, but I think Herbert at 10 might actually even be a little bit aggressive. He's in front of Caleb Williams, who I could see having another step forward, although put the ball on target a little bit more there, buddy. He could take a step forward. Bo Nix could do more than he does, and basically like one quarter a game. Like if he just played a consistent game for the entire season, Bo Nix could get higher. Stafford was top 10. I think the only concern of why I don't have him inside the top 10 is just, does his body hold up for another year? And it's all with his arm. So like all with his arm, Matthew Stafford, all with his arm, Baker Mayfield, mostly all. You get my point there. But those quarterbacks, which we'll have a conversation about another quarterback that's kind of related later on. I do like that Herbert runs a little bit more, kind of like Baker Mayfield 2 years ago. But anyway, that's why I have Herbert at 10 and why he's not quote unquote higher. Daniel Jones, I have at 17, and everybody, oh my God, why do you have that? Daniel Jones is QB1 when he plays. This is the difference. The perfect example of the difference between real life and fantasy is watching Sam Darnold lead the Seahawks to a Super Bowl championship and Daniel Jones play football, and know that Daniel Jones is great in fantasy, not so great in real life. Sam Darnold, I want to call him good in real life, but absolutely miserable in fantasy. Aaron Rodgers had more fantasy points per game than Sam Darnold. Just let that sink in for why Sam Darnold's not even inside my top 25. That's why. Again, all on the arm. There's no rushing upside. So anyway, Daniel Jones rushing upside. I know there's a big question mark of if he's ready for week one, if he's healthy, and maybe some people are kind of straddling the fence there and not wanting to rank him higher. But whether he's back with the Colts or somebody like the Vikings paid to bring him in and replace J.J. McCarthy, Daniel Jones at 17, you could argue is a little bit too low. I think that's just the risk of him staying healthy and then, of course, being healthy for week one. But I think 17, he might move up. If we knew today 100% healthy and on the Vikings, I don't know what I said. And the Vikings? I would have a conversation of Daniel Jones versus Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert inside the top 10, let's be honest. Tyler Shough inside the top 20, and I think there's a case you can make for him being in that 14 to 16, 17 range. Since took over, actually, more 300-yard passing games than our boy Jackson Dart, because Jackson Dart didn't throw for any, and Shough had more than one. Has some rushing upside, and really like what we saw. Look, all that polish from all those years in college, that age didn't hurt him at all. But all the jokes aside, is he's basically doing it with Chris Olave and nobody else, and finally helped unlock what we knew Chris Olave could do with a quarterback that would actually throw downfield a little bit more and actually look for him in the red zone and the end zone. So assuming the Saints are going to be smart enough to add somebody alongside Olave, yeah, Shough could hit the sophomore slump, quote unquote, and take a little bit of step back, but that's why Shough's not near QB1 territory. But that's the point, is he was basically pushing QB1 territory in points per game, and that's as a rookie with very limited weapons. So I like Shough, especially in Superflex, or if you want to take a Brock Purdy and a flyer on somebody who could potentially outperform Purdy on the ceiling of a Shough, that's okay with me. So speaking of only doing it with their arm, similar to Sam Darnold, one spot in front of Sam Darnold at QB 25. Yes, that's how far down Darnold is. 25 and 26 for this player, CJ Stroud. That rookie season seems so long ago, and I know people are apologizing for like every excuse that could be made. Offensive line, the game plans, because the offensive coordinators, blah, 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 up and down the road. And I want CJ Stroud to be better. Like, I was trying to find rookie jerseys when he came out, and we saw the passing in year one. He's mainly a pure pocket. So I drew the comparison to Matt Ryan. Another show with a little bit more rushing upside, obviously, but not a lot. A little bit more athleticism. But he's a pocket passer. He needs to do it with his arm. Throws a really nice ball. And you could say Tank Dell got hurt. Maybe Tank Dell is the one that just unlocks it. Who the hell knows? But CJ Stroud just hasn't looked the part the past 2 years. And that's with Nico Collins. But again, Nico Collins in and out of the lineup, getting hurt. And I loved some Jaden Higgins. And maybe maybe Nico Collins plus Tank Dell coming back plus Higgins' second year, and of course Jalen Noel, and down the list that he finally gets back, but it has to all be on his arm. He has to throw for 4,200 yards and 30-something touchdowns just to get inside the top 15, because he's not going to add 300-400 yards on the ground and 4, 5, 6 touchdowns on the ground. So CJ Stroud's at 25. I would take a chance on Kyler Murray and a new team. I would take a chance on Cam Ward with Brian Dable and how Cam looked in the second half of the season. And we'll talk about wide receivers tying into the Titans here in a second, but that's assuming some things, of course. And the last one, obviously would take a flyer on him more than, but I wanted to bring him in for a second part of a conversation. But Malik Willis, I have Malik Willis inside the top 20, assuming it's a decent landing spot for whoever pays to bring him in. But the interesting thing with Malik Willis is right now, I think is a good, if you're in a keeper / dynasty, I say slash because some people are in keeper leagues where you keep 4, 5, 6, 7 players, like half your roster, or just maybe 2 or 3, and you're in super flex, but stash Malik Willis on this potential. I think he's a great sell high right now. I love some, if you guys have been with me since Malik Willis was a rookie, and even before that, you know I'm a fan of Malik Willis, and you know that I wanted him to get a chance and get the chance to start, and I thought he needed to sit, obviously coming from Liberty, but at the same time, the excitement based on what he's done in fill-in time is going through the roof, which gives a real opportunity to sell high, because if you can get in Dynasty near QB1 value, get rid of, like, move on. This is you're selling high. You're avoiding all the risk that Malik Willis is not. I don't call him Matt Flynn. Let's be clear. That's just first name that came to mind because of the Packers. But we've seen quarterbacks play this fill-in game before, and then when stepped into the position to be the full-time starter, and teams are actually focused on you and how to specifically stop you every single week, and not just be like, hey, this is fill-in guy. Let's make sure we focus on all the pieces that we know and a little bit about the quarterback. I think sometimes that gets overlooked, and that's sometimes why we see quarterbacks fill in, play pretty well until they're asked to do more or do it more consistently. So actually, and then you can look at it the other way. That's actually a thumbs up check mark for Tyler Shough, by the way. So anyway, Malik Willis, I love the potential, and I actually think he could get higher than 19 for redraft. In keeper and dynasty, I think there's a sell high opportunity. So speaking of somebody that used to play for the Packers, let's move to wide receiver. Davante Adams is inside my top 10. I don't know why people don't want to put him inside their top 10. I don't know why. I guess maybe this is the assumption that Davante Adams could hang it up, or Matthew Stafford could. Like, everybody said they're coming back. Davante Adams led the league in touchdowns, got hurt, led the league in touchdowns, wasn't playing games, led the league in touchdowns. Like, the dude is a touchdown maker with Matthew Stafford. Similarly to what we've seen with other quarterbacks and connections. Like, for years, Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett. There's something there. And yes, we don't like to chase touchdowns, but if we actually believe that Matthew Stafford is going to throw at least 30 next year, which I think we would all assume with health, he's going to Davante Adams for nearly 50% of them. No, that's a little overblown, but he just looks for him, which actually hurts Nakua's touchdown upside, as we just saw last year. But Stafford and Adams have a connection that's not going to go away. Teams can scheme for it all they want, but it's Stafford and Adams. We're not talking about scheming for Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson. Like, this is going to continue. I'm going to have Davante Adams inside my top. I have Davante Adams in front of Nico Collins because Nico Collins can't stay healthy. And Nico Collins has CJ Stroud. And Adams has Stafford. And Nico Collins also has Tank Dell coming back. And Jaden Higgins year 2. Davante Adams, Davante Adams, Davante Adams. Sticking with him. And we're going to talk about the Rams when we talk about running backs. There's another one. Like, do people hate the Rams? Like, that's the only thing I can figure out. Like, I don't understand why nobody ever wants any of the Rams, except for Puka Nacua. All right, let's talk about somebody that everybody loves and wants to love and continues to try to love, but this wide receiver did not finish inside the top 30. It barely finished inside the top 40 in points per game with a certain quarterback. And that certain quarterback is J.J. McCarthy, because we're talking about Justin Jefferson here. Justin Jefferson right now is 12 for me. I barely, as you can hear, barely have him as wide receiver. The last wide receiver 1 on the list. And people still have him inside the top 10. People are still pushing the top 5, putting him in the conversation with Drake London and CeeDee Lamb and others. And I just can't do it. I know I just brought up earlier on this very show, what if they get Daniel Jones? Well, then, of course, put him up there in that same tier with Lamb and Pickens and London and all that type of stuff. I wouldn't put him in tier 1. Let me make that clear. But in that second tier of wide receivers, absolutely. No question about it. But we don't know as of today. And I brought this up on the Fantasy Pros show. I don't know why I said Fantasy Pros like that. Brought it up on the Fantasy Pros show. It's kind of like one word, and I kind of paused. Anyway, moving on. What if they do chase Daniel Jones, or what if they go into this quarterback market, maybe even Malik Willis, and they just don't get anybody in their left holding the bag, and all of a sudden it's, hey, Russell Wilson can come in and take over until maybe J.J. McCarthy figures things out. And all of a sudden, Justin Jefferson at 12 is okay, maybe even a little bit lower. Again, not knowing the quarterback, Jefferson can absolutely move up. So yes, Justin Jefferson's about as good as they come, but his quarterback situation is not. So we'll have to see how that plays out, but one behind him also see how this plays out. Even lower than what most people are ranking. Like this wide receiver is ranking ahead of Justin Jefferson, and I have him actually behind Justin Jefferson. It's Malik Nabers, mostly because of the report that just came out. I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. They had to wait on his surgery because of the swelling and everything, and then so the surgery was behind when they wanted to happen, and then because it was 2 surgeries in one, now there's a question of if he's ever going to be ready for week 1. And if he is ready for week 1, is it going to be 100% Malik Nabers? And all that being said, Malik Nabers is amazing. Like, put up Malik Nabers' pure talent inside the conversation for the top 5. The problem is we are playing fantasy and we are having to make these decisions in the first 2-3 rounds. And for a lot of people, that's early second round where they have them. And I'm just not making that investment when I can go get Drake London. Assuming it's Penix, or obviously that could go south. Even if it is Penix, like I want Drake London. I want George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb on the same team. I want Chris Olave with Tyler Shough. I want Devontae Adams. I want Amon-Ra St. Brown. Obviously, no question about that. It's just, that's what it comes down to. Like, I know I'm getting these guys in the production from week 1. If this was Malik Nabers, he's at 13. Malik Nabers versus Garrett Wilson. Obviously, I'll take the chance on waiting a few weeks on pure 100% Malik Nabers. But we have to make these decisions fancy, and it is easier to overcome things at the beginning of the year in the first 3 or 4 weeks with waivers and how deep your rosters are. But you're asking me to invest in a top-tier wide receiver when there are similar top-tier wide receivers available. And that's really just what it comes down to. I want to know what love is. I want to know. That was bad. God, I don't even know what's happening. That was for all my New Girl fans. That's really all it was. Anyway, I just want to know getting a wide receiver in the first 2 rounds. I got to move on to something else at this point. Let's talk the Chicago Bears again. Chicago Bears, Rome Odunze, Luther Bird, and DJ Moore. A lot of questions about this, and a lot of people want to rank Luther Bird in the highest, and I have no problem with this. Again, something, if you guys have been following me know, is I was a big Luther Burden fan, more than most, and thought that he deserved to be near the conversation of that tier 1 of wide receivers in the draft. And a lot of people had questions about his play in college and the drop-off and injury and all that stuff. We saw what Luther Burden can do. The thing is, we also saw what Luther Burden can do with no Rome Odunze. DJ Moore is still around with a massive contract hit. Maybe they trade him, but even if they clear him out, and now it's down to a healthy Odunze and Burden, which is really appealing. And hell, I'd like to have that on a lot of teams. Let's not forget Colston Loveland. And that guy, the one that they took way early, and everybody was shocked that they took Loveland, who started the year coming back from injury, and then that second half of the season, especially down towards the end of the year, holy crap, Loveland was everything we had hoped, and then some. So it's not the fact that I'm like, oh my God, Loveland's going to kill both of them. But look at the Lions for a simple example of this. We wanted 2 years ago, Jameson Williams, and we got the breakout 2 years ago, and it came at the expense of Sam Laporta, who hasn't really bounced back since, and put up some numbers if healthy. And of course, Drew Petzing coming in can actually help Laporta, but that's a conversation for the tight end show. You look at a lot of teams. When you have 3 options, I did a whole article about it, about the opportunities of 3 players, 2 wide receivers and a tight end, or 3 wide receivers, the opportunities for all 3 to have 1,000+ yards and be a top fantasy producer, at least top 25 or top 10 at a tight end. And it's happened not even a dozen times throughout the years. And a lot of those included 1,000, and 900 receiving yards. So I bring that all up to say, even if DJ Moore is gone, I think Luther Burden is a nice wide receiver 3 with upside for more, because whoever it is, Odunze or Burden, could be top 15. It just comes down to, was Odunze's season marred by the injury, and then what kind of the fall off it was tied into there? Can we get back to early season Odunze? And let's all go back to the one thing too. Caleb Williams still didn't throw for 4,000 yards. So we can hope for more and hope for better from Caleb Williams, of course. But even at best case scenarios for all of them, somebody has to take a step back. And if it's Odunze and Loveland and Burden is the third option, that's wide receiver 3 territory. If it's Burden and Odunze, like I said, wide receiver 2 or even better. If it's Burden or Loveland, you get my point here. Somebody is going to be good, just not great. Somebody that I think was pretty good / getting towards great when healthy, that's a major question mark. Heck, we made jokes about it, about how it took longer to get back from a regular, like an actual football athlete injury than getting shot, was Ricky Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall right now, for all intents and purposes, is the number one option on the 49ers. George Kittle, not going to be starting the year. Is he going to play in 2026? This sounds optimistic that it's going to happen, but when? Juwan Jennings is a free agent. Brandon Ayuk's not coming back to this team. We all know that. So Ricky Pearsall is the one. Now, I will say this. This is similar to, hoping that Khalil Shakir could be the one for the Bills. I like him. Is he Stephon Diggs, that being Pearsall? I don't think he's quite that, but I love what he does over the middle field. I love what he does in the eliminatory game. Knows how to get in space, knows how to get open, can play the ball deep too. And I think there's potential he could be a 1 if there's somebody alongside of him as a quality 2, almost like a 1A, 1B. I think he's actually better suited to be a 2. But all that being said, the 49ers are going to do something to address that. And at 31, where I have him in front of Wan'Dale Robinson and Jacoby Myers and some Tampa Bay guys we're about to talk about, I think is pretty fair. And honestly, I could see him climbing higher. So I think part of it's just being burned on how much he was hurt, which, of course, could be something you don't want to get involved with. Marvin Harrison is inside my top 35 and pushing the top 30. And I think this is also a perception of how disappointed people are from the hype and talent coming out of college to what happened in the NFL. Some of it being route running, which was a concern we knew about. The fit with Kyler Murray was a major question mark, and they just weren't connecting. We still remember the jumping jacks game, which, if you don't know what I'm talking about, is basically doing those in the end zone, waving his arms. Kyler Murray just never progressed back to him after not seeing the read the first time. So anyway, point being here is it's not Kyler Murray anymore. It's Jacoby Brissett. Likely it's Jacoby. Maybe they make another move. Maybe they go Malik Willis route, make a trade. Who the hell knows? But as of right now, it's Jacoby Brissett. And everybody's hyped for Michael Wilson with what Jacoby Brissett did. But at the same time, what got overlooked is Marvin Harrison in his one, for all intents and purposes, healthy game coming back with Michael Wilson and Jacoby Brissett was the one that Brissett went to. And he went to him more than Michael Wilson, treated him as the one. Marvin Harrison at 32 might be too low. I know this is why I say the perception is because we've been burned, and he wasn't a wide receiver 1 in the NFL or in fantasy after the hype coming out of college. So people are just this perception of like, well, he stinks, he's a bust. It's been disappointing. There's no question about it. He hasn't been a top 10 wide receiver, which for all intents and purposes is kind of a bust. But 32 in fantasy, again, another player that might be a little bit low. Let's talk the Buccaneers. And let's just put a pin in it. I mean, let's be honest. Look, I have Mike Evans in there, and I know he's going to explore the free agency market, which I brought up again on another Fantasy Pros show. And I love Mike Evans in a potential other situation, a few spots, especially because what it could do for Ibuka. But as of right now, what if Mike Evans does come back? What if he's like, you know what? I do want to finish my career with the Bucs, and they bring him back. And now we have a healthy Chris Godwin, Ibuka, Mike Evans. Oh, by the way, also healthy Jalen McMillan. And that's really what it comes down to. Ibuka and Baker Mayfield were so on the same page for the first 5 games. That also included 3 games with Mike Evans. And then if you watched and know this, the Buccaneers, 2 things happened. Baker Mayfield started getting hurt and didn't play healthy basically second half of the season. But the Buccaneers were also facing teams that said, hey, this Ibuka guy, he's the one we need to pay attention to. Also, we still don't have a healthy Chris Godwin at this point, 100% healthy Chris Godwin at this point. So let's treat Ibuka as the number 1. And like a lot of rookies, when these things kind of happen, not necessarily equipped to do that without Mike Evans. So he did play 2 other really good games after Evans got hurt. But after that 5th game is where the fall off, again, multiple reasons for the Buccaneers that this fell off. But Ibuka never got back to being Ibuka. Part of it because of the coverage attention, but also Baker Mayfield went from throwing 92% of his passes on target to Ibuka to 72. And it's not all Baker, and it's not all Baker's injury. Yes, that is part of the factor, but also some of it does go to the coverage and Ibuka not being able to break free of top-end coverage. So Chris Godwin showed that connection, and I know the numbers weren't 100% there. Again, Baker Mayfield not being 100%, but you saw that connection. Baker and Godwin just know each other. Go back to my Russell Wilson, Tyler Lockett situation and all the rest. So Evans back, it's just going to clog everything up. And we know Evans will be Evans. If Evans is gone, I think Ibuka could be a wide receiver too, but I put him kind of more on the low end in the conversation of like a Ladd McConkey and Jalen Waddle and Cortland Sutton. And that's assuming Chris Godwin is the second option behind him in wide receiver 3, and Jalen McMillan is the wide receiver 4. But what also happened to Jalen McMillan in one of those games? There was just that rapport with Baker Mayfield, too. What if McMillan is more of a factor than people give him credit for? Because we were all excited about him before his injury from 2 years ago. So, long story short, which is not short because it's a super long story at this point. I just think there's a lot of questions with the Buccaneers wide receivers, and I'm not going to put any of them inside, well, except Evans because he'd be the touchdown maker. I wouldn't put any of them inside the top 25 right now, outside of Evans. Again. So Evans top 25, the rest not yet. And we'll have to see how that plays out. The one that pains me the most, I don't know if you guys can guess this. If you've watched videos or anything and you've heard me reference, there's a certain signed football sitting next to me. And the certain signed football was one of my favorite rookie values from 2 years ago that a lot of people benefited from listening to me and were like, yeah, I'm so glad you brought him up and blah, blah, blah. Those same people, like me, were not happy to have this wide receiver on their team last year. And we made apologies for him at the beginning of the year. Hurt, not 100% with his wrist, hand, and now you probably know who I'm talking about. You might have already figured it out, but was kind of hesitant to take on contact. It's like, okay, the injury. Then, well, okay, because the injury and didn't play with his quarterback last year, so let's give him a little bit more time to develop a rapport. Saw a little bit of flashes, but then the Jaguars made a trade, and they brought in Jacoby Myers, and everything went to crap because also Parker Washington was healthy and starting to do things. And that's why Brian Thomas is wide receiver 40. And that hurts. That hurts me deep in my soul. I don't even want to look at that name. It just, ugh. The thing is, I wrote it up in the postseason recap, is it wasn't just that the rapport wasn't there. It wasn't just the bad start of the season. And it wasn't just Parker Washington being Parker Washington, which is cool. I actually think that Parker Washington is a nice value for next year. They're almost ranked right next to each other. It's that Parker Washington does what Trevor Lawrence looks for early. And it's the slot option, somebody breaking free quickly, hitting the middle of the field, which is also part of what Jacoby Myers does. And it's something that Brian Thomas can do. But once Parker Washington became the slot consistently, playing like most of the snaps, is that Trevor Lawrence just look for him, hit it over the middle. If you didn't see him, look to Jacoby Myers. The reason we're not looking to Brian Thomas as much anymore, the target share went down, is because they're sending him 20 yards downfield on half of his plays. One of the highest ADOTs in the league. It went up almost 50%. Brian Thomas's own ADOT went almost 50% up after this whole situation happened with Parker Washington, which makes the opportunities lower because Trevor Lawrence isn't waiting that long to throw it to Brian Thomas. And then at the same time, those are harder completed passes. So Brian Thomas with a healthy and playing Parker Washington and Jacoby Myers with his team, unfortunately, is a wide receiver 3 that needs an injury or a new team. Can we get a trade, Jaguars? Just put him somewhere else. And that's even with the Travis Hunter playing defense situation and barely playing wide receiver supposedly for next year. All right, 2 more things before we get out of here. The Titans, I think that Chimere DK can be their Wan'Dale Robinson, and I bring that up specifically to say this. It's Brian Dable. Brian Dable loves some Cam Ward, and I have some excitement for Cam Ward. You guys know I like Cam Ward. But I actually really think that could benefit by using DK in the Wan'Dale Robinson role, which I have DK as a wide receiver 4, but I could see him getting up into wide receiver 3 plus territory unless they go sign Wan'Dale Robinson, the free agent, hurting DK's value. And I do think there's other opportunities here, though. Yes, Wan'Dale Robinson, back with Dable, back with the Titans. But what is the one thing that Dable liked to do, too? Make Darius Slayton a thing for years. And it's not like Darius Slayton was putting up 1,100 yards. Heck, he led the team in receiving yards with 700-ish most years for a long time there. But he likes to send them deep and take shots deep. What if they sign Alec Pierce? What if they even kind of try to use Juwan Jennings in that role? And then DK is left alone. And then DK has the Wan'Dale Robinson role alongside somebody else. Or maybe they draft somebody. Who the hell knows? What do you mean? If they leave DK alone, that kind of tells you some things that DK with Dable could be in the Wan'Dale role. If they sign Wan'Dale Robinson, then maybe look to IU Manor. Or, yeah, and this is all assuming that Calvin Ridley is either 1, maybe it's not IU Manor, it's Ridley, and there's something left in the tank, or 2, he's just not with the team anymore. Watch the Titans. The Titans could be very intriguing next year in a sneaky find. Outside, I don't really love that backfield because I feel like he's going to, you know what, as we're about to talk about Tony Pollard, tune in 2 weeks when we talk about that backfield. And then I brought up Wan'Dale, Pierce, and Jennings in free agency. Predicted some landing spots that we would like for fantasy, not predicting specifically this is where they're going. But I think all 3 could have interesting appeal. I like Alec Pierce if he's with the Raiders because what do we know about Kubiak? I've said this before. Kubiak loves to scheme 2 wide receivers, uses 2 running backs, 2 tight ends a lot of times to do so. Not a ton of 3 wide. But when you see him use his 2 wide receivers, he did it with Torrey Horton. He did it with Rashid Shaheed. He did it with Jackson Smith and Jigba. He did it, oh, by the way, with Shaheed with the Saints and Olave at times. He likes to try to get one of his receivers breaking free 15, 20 yards downfield for a potential target and potential big play. If there was only one wide receiver in the free agent market who knew how to make big plays and get some really high A. Oh, yeah, Alec Pierce. If Alec Pierce ends up with the Raiders, man, top 25? Because Brock Bowers going to... But Brock Bowers will be so much of a factor, and love the Mendoza, Bowers, and potential in this team. But Bowers, Mendoza, Genty, and Pierce, you're telling me Pierce can't be basically Michael Wilson? No, Michael Wilson was top 5, top 10 wide receiver with Jacoby Brissett in the games without Marvin Harrison with McBride. But I was going to bring that up to say, like, Bowers and Pierce could be the Wilson and McBride for the Raiders. Maybe to a lower level for Pierce than the Michael Wilson fun that we saw, because maybe Pierce doesn't see 13 targets a game. But that's some excitement there to get you out on a high note. And I know there wasn't a lot of fun stuff in this one. There will be going forward because it is the off season, and I still want to incorporate that. If you missed it, I did a cereal rankings bracket because I jumped on the candy bracket with Sia a couple months ago, and we somehow spilled into cereal, and he asked me to give him my cereal rankings, which are up on The Athletic and have been since COVID, and it's been updated a few times, and so he did a cereal bracket because there's been some new ones, but of course people love to argue about food, and you know me and my cereal. So until then, and I don't know if you heard the snoring in the background, but that's our new pup, Ziggy, which we love a lot, because Berkeley has a good new friend now. And it's Nicole's dog. So if you haven't seen pictures on Instagram, go over there. You know the handle. It's the same as Twitter and all that stuff. Okay, now bye.